All right, good morning, everyone. It is officially 10 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning. We hope that you are all staying safe and healthy, hopefully in your own homes like we are at the state office during this time. Before we get started, please make sure that your microphone is muted just so we can reduce the amount of background noise during the webinar. You can use the chat box at the bottom of your screen, and I see a lot of people already have to check in this morning. And go ahead and type questions that you might have during this session, and then we'll save the last 10 or 15 minutes of the webinar to address those questions. With those two things covered, let's go ahead and get started. I am very excited to be able to welcome Pam Bennett as our speaker this morning. Pam is the State Master Gardener Program Director for Ohio State University Extension. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Pam. Go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. How's everybody doing out there? I don't know about you, but day 4 and I'm kind of dying here. So we're in new times. You guys have already been doing these webinars, I understand, for a while. This is the new way Extension is going to be teaching, I'm afraid, for the next month or two, maybe longer, we'll see. But boy, we are in a huge learning curve. So we're asking all of our Master Gardener volunteers to kind of bear with us and work through this with us, because it is going to be a big challenge. So today we're going to talk about apps, and I get my screen sharing going here. And the topic is, there's an app for that. And we'll get set as soon as I can get, there we go. All right, so we're gonna have a couple different things here. I'm gonna do a PowerPoint real quick first, then I'm gonna switch to the other Pam Bennett and actually switch to my phone, and cross your fingers, technology works. It will all go well. If technology doesn't work, I have a backup. So we're gonna kind of work through this today together, and I appreciate your patience. I don't know if any of you have seen the memes on social media regarding the webinar bingo. If you haven't seen them, they're pretty funny, because webinars are new to some people in Extension, and boy, you can play bingo and hit a full, whatever that full board's called, cover the whole board very quickly. Can you see my screen? You know, turn your video off, turn your audio off, mute. So it's really been fun and challenging. And of course, we have to have some humor in all of this. Walmart was completely out of toilet paper, so I bought all the underwear they had, and the toilet paper thing seems to be a real question as to why that's a big deal. I saw this one the other day, and I really thought this was pretty true, because I'm in day 4 and I am an extrovert, and extroverts are really going to struggle. So it's important that we kind of all stay connected. We use Zooms, we use FaceTime, whatever we can to stay connected. But this was probably one of my favorites yesterday that came out. For those of you working at home, tell us something about your kids, but refer to the kids as the coworkers, your spouse as your CEO, and your pet is your secretary. So this generated some really fun conversations. My secretary is avoiding going out in the rain to pee. My coworkers refuse to respect my social distancing. My CEO clearly has not completed the sexual harassment training. And my secretary's perfume smells a bit like skunk. And my favorite of all is, everyone's fired. The coworkers can't focus for more than 5 minutes, let alone complete a task without asking 28 questions. The CEO is wanting to have meetings every 30 minutes on other projects. And of course, the secretary just pooped on the floor. So again, we have to have some humor in this. And I hope you all are staying healthy, taking care of each other, checking in on our volunteers, especially our older volunteers, and just generally trying to help each other through this. So today, and what a great time to have a discussion about apps, because you're going to be wanting to do some gardening. And fortunately, if the weather breaks for you all earlier, you'll get out and be able to do this, and you might want to refer to some of these gardening apps. So we're going to talk about apps, and I want to start with a little bit of background first, then we'll actually go to the apps themselves, and I'm going to kind of pick out some of my favorite apps to share with you, and then in the chat box later on, if we have a chance, I was going to have you folks type in some of your favorite apps, because we all have our ones that we like, ones that we use, our go-to apps. But you know, we need to know how they work before we actually want to buy them or download them. So start with hardware. If you have Android, Surface, Dell, or Windows systems, you purchase your apps at the Google Play Store. So make sure you have an account through Google Play. It doesn't mean you have to put in a credit card or anything. You can pay for it at the time of purchase if you decide to purchase one, but Google Play is available to everybody to download their apps. On iPhones, iPads, of course, you have the App Store. The iTunes, you can get the App Store. So this is where you would find your particular apps. So it depends on what system you have, but just understand the first thing is to know, where do I get these apps? How do I get them? And are they free or do they cost? Now, when you get into your store to get your apps, you want to search for them. And there's all kinds of different ways to search. Make sure you click on apps, or when you search, you're going to get books and everything else that goes along with it. So if you type in apps, gardening apps, you're going to be more likely or more inclined to get the gardening ones come up first. If you type in gardening on one site, I think this was Google Play, these are the types of apps that you're going to get. And you can see just kind of a wide range of audiobooks, ebooks, movies and TV. So if you want an app, you want to type in gardening apps. And that way then it's going to narrow it down and give you a list of apps. And then as you see at the top here where the apps are, you can click on more and it will give you more. But don't forget, there are some ebooks out there, and now's a great time. You know, if you can't get to the libraries, you can't get online at the libraries, now's a great time to think about some of these ebooks that you want to catch up with. Another result on iPhone apps, so type in horticulture apps. So just be sure when you're searching for these apps to kind of vary your search words. I was looking the other day for Michael Durr's app, his woody landscape plant apps, and I was searching for that, and all that came up was Michael Jackson stuff. So sometimes you really have to get down in there and dig and narrow it down to find specific apps that you might be looking for. Be careful what you use for a search word. I just typed in for plants, and I got this one: plants versus zombies, water-bought plants, plants versus zombies, and so forth. So, you know, just again, alter your search words, do what you can to try to figure it out. And notice at the top, as you're searching, you can search and narrow it down to all prices. So you can start with free, all devices, whatever devices you have. And you can also start with those that are reviewed, top reviews to lower reviews. And this one, of course, I thought was kind of interesting. As you search, when you click on it, be sure to look at what it's about. This was Plant Nanny. So I thought, okay, this is good. Help me to remind me to water my plants. Well, it was actually an app that was the cutest hydration app, according to what was said here on one of the comments. So this had nothing to do with gardening, but again, just do your job do your work, do your due diligence on searching, and just try to dig down in and try to find those apps and look at them and see, you know, exactly what they're going to provide to you. Then I found Flower Zombie Wars, Angry Plants Defense. So there's game apps too. Now, what I want to really emphasize is, as with anything, you get what you pay for. Free apps, as you know, if you use apps, you're going to get ads. And in that case, you know, you either deal with them, you skip ads, or you can eliminate for upgrading and purchasing. And I do a lot of digging and research before I actually purchase an app. So use the reviews. If you look at an app, you'll see the numbers, as you can see right here, 4.3 out of 5. Read the comments. In this case, excellent app for plant ID, unfortunately somewhat confusing and not intuitive. So go through and read the reviews. Now, of course, we all know that many people, the ones that do the reviews are usually the ones that are unhappy, or they're dissatisfied with something, so they're going to post a review about it. But I think you can get a really good feel for it before you actually purchase it. And in addition, usually you'll get a free app first, and then you can upgrade through the purchase. And I did that in particular with PlantSnap, and I'll talk a little bit about that here a little later. But use the reviews, pay attention to them. And again, ads are annoying, but you can skip through them. But I have found with many apps, you think you're skipping through, but you accidentally click on something, and now all of a sudden you're in a total other world where they're asking you to buy something. Just really pay attention to what you're doing, and don't just kind of click without really knowing what you're clicking on. Read about the app, when you look at an app, make sure it's applicable to the USA. I have found some really good apps in terms of plant identification or, you know, information about plants, but maybe they're not applicable to the USA, Turkey, England, you know, other types of apps that other developers have done, but they're not specific for my area. So make sure they're applicable to the USA. The numbers in the comments, again, read them thoroughly, kind of look through it before you make a final decision. And look at the size of the app. I mentioned Michael Durr's Woody Plants. That thing is huge. And it's actually, you're not downloading just an app, you're downloading the whole book. So it takes up a lot of space on your cell phone or your iPad. And if you're going to download this particular one, make sure you have that space. And of course, it does cost. It is a very good app. I mean, many of you know Michael Durr's Manual of Woody Landscape Plants. We use that as our Bible for identifying landscape plants. But just make sure that you have that space because it's a rather large app. The other end of that spectrum is some of them will take you online. So Michael Durr's Manual of Woody Landscape Plants, you actually download the whole thing. Whereas other apps, you click on a tree, for instance, you want to know more, and they actually take you online to get that information, which is okay if you are, if you have wireless or if you have the opportunity to go online. But if you're out somewhere hiking and you don't have, you know, you want to ID something and you don't have that wireless connectivity, you're limited in using that. And as you see the one comment here, very good app, only no picture went offline. That's why they gave it a 4-star only. So those, again, I can't emphasize the reviews enough. Those reviews will tell you a little bit more about this particular app. Then you download the app. So you've made your decision, you're going to download, and I don't know about you, I'm fairly computer savvy and I use quite a few apps, but I always have that kind of like hesitation before I click, okay, install. So, you know, again, do all your work first. Then when you start downloading, it's going to ask you permissions. Don't be concerned about these at first. They want to know your location, permission to have your camera, your address book, etc. You can actually go ahead and give them all those permissions. And then if you don't like those permissions, immediately go into your settings and block them. And that's not going to stop you from using that app, because when you open that app, you start using it, it's going to say, hey, wait a minute, I need permission to have your location before I can, you know, this app will work. So then you have the opportunity to say, sure, go ahead and turn it on. I always turn that back off simply because in the background, those apps are working, they're taking up space, they're using your, some of them might be using your data. So I turn all my permissions off unless it's an app that I use on a regular basis. And then when I use that app, the question will come up to me, I need your location. Do you want to allow? And you can say yes, but then I go right back into permissions, and I'll show you here in a second where to do that and turn that back off as soon as I'm finished. So either allow them or block them, but when you download it, you're going to want to allow them so you can at least get started. Another very important fact, uninstall if you don't like it. You know, I've downloaded apps, I've used them, I've found that they're not very useful, very friendly, and I think sometimes we have a situation where we just keep loading up things on our iPads or our cell phones, and we really don't know what's there. When I first got my upgraded Samsung, I went in and I uninstalled or turned off or force stopped everything that I did not use. And then if I needed to use it, it was there, I could use it, but if I didn't want it, I just took it off, so it's not taking up space on my cell phone. So just some kind of basics here to really think about before you download and use your apps. Again, going into your application manager, we're all going to be different depending on our system, our setup, whatever one we have, Android, iPhone, etc. Find out where your apps are. Go into those application settings, and if you click on each one of these, then you're going to see that information. So there's all of my apps in alphabetical order. You can see where I've disabled some of them. Amazon Kindle, if I don't use it all the time, why am I taking up space? Why am I actually, you know, why am I actually having that on there and working? So I disable it. So if you're not using it, either uninstall or disable. And then going into Alan Armitage's app, you can see the mobile data used. So that's actual mobile data that I turned on and used. Notifications down here I have blocked, permissions allowed. But if I turn that app back on, it will ask me, I need permission to access your camera. I need permission to access your address book. So it will ask me and I'll still be able to use it. Types of apps, there's all kind of apps out there. There's gardening magazines and books, things that you can just download and install, or you can go online. Again, if you're getting ebooks and you're actually downloading them, you're taking up space, so keep that in mind. Plant identification, there are dichotomous keys, and these keys are very useful, but as a gardener and a horticulturist, you need to know how to use a dichotomous key. So if you haven't gone through any classes or sessions, those are great sessions to have so that you know how to use that dichotomous key. Plant diaries, just basically keeping track of what you planted and when and where, and I kind of like that because none of us are really, well, I'll speak for myself. I'm not really good about keeping a list of all the plants I put in, or let's say the trees I planted, what cultivar they are, what's, when I planted it, when I did maintenance. There's some really good plant diaries that you could use to track some of that information if you would like. There are some alerts. One that is becoming very, very obvious for us right now is the Great Lakes Early Detection Network, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but that focuses on invasive species. And I would suspect this is something you guys in Virginia may want to use or have already been using because of the spotted lanternfly infestations. We're going to be getting our Master Gardener volunteers up and running. It's a free app. We're going to get them up and running and start identifying Ailanthus altissima, which is the host plant for the spotted lanternfly. So we don't have it identified yet in Ohio as of today. That could change this spring, but we do have plantings and groupings and, isolated spots of Ailanthus altissima. So Tree of Heaven is the plant the spotted lanternfly likes. If we can get a handle this summer by identifying where Ailanthus altissima plantings are, we can upload them into this app, and then we all will have a better idea of what to start looking for in terms of spotted lanternfly. Just general gardening information, how to, rain gardens, rose gardens. The three at the bottom are more just gardening information, and then some tools to actually help us with gardening. And I'm going to go through some of these apps to kind of give you a better feel for what I prefer, what I think is really a very useful app, and then also ask you for some of your feedback. In addition to apps, how do you organize them? So I have seen some of my Master Gardener volunteers' cell phones that are like 5 screens of all the different apps, and they're all over the place. So I suggest that you go in and you organize your apps. And I have, let me see if I can get the annotate here and see if that'll work for you all. Right here, I can make it a little thicker. You see where I have Hort Apps Good. That Hort Apps Good is where I put all of my apps that I like for horticulture. I also have one down here, Hort Apps Fair. Now, typically I would uninstall those because they're taking up space on my phone, but because I've done this talk several times, I actually keep them on there just to, in case I want to show people that I think, these are fair, they're average. Hort Apps Poor, I used to have that, and I'm like, why am I keeping that? It doesn't make any sense to have those. I also have a social media folder. I also have a shopping folder. So instead of having 5 screens of apps that I'm hunting for, I organize them into folders. And I believe it's the same with iTunes, but all you do is click on that app, drag it into another app, and it will then automatically create a folder. I think with iPad, you click on it and hold it, then you can create your own folder and drag them all together. So I really encourage people to do a good job and try to put them in folders, try to make sure, you have an opportunity so that you know where things are, so that you keep your cell phones a little bit more organized. Okay, that concludes this part. So if you bear with me, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to grab my cell phone. We are going to share my cell phone, and I'm going to share my screen where all of my apps are. Okay, there we go. All right, so I can't look at the screen here. I gotta look at my phone. I'm trying to do my screen and that's not gonna work. So let's take a look at creating a folder. You see at the very top where I have a social media app. And then you see to the right of that, I have a folder, a shopping folder. On an Android, if I wanna put WhatsApp into my social media, I would click on this and drag it to that folder right there. I want to drag it in there. Oh, it keeps moving. Drag it in there. And now you see my social media app includes WhatsApp. So again, organize your folders as much as you possibly can. I've got a few other screens here that I'm going to try to see if I can't, now that I have some time off, if I can't get them organized. But instead of searching through all of these, I put these on my front. In addition, on Androids, if I click on this at the bottom right, those are all of my apps. I can take those and move them to the front page and put them into my favorite apps. All right, so let's get back here and see if I can't get, give me just a second here, there, questions. Okay. Yes, a couple comments here to talk about. Michael Durr is gone, unfortunately. And one of the things that I failed to mention earlier, apps change. They change over time. When I started doing this 4 years ago at one of the international conferences, there were tons of gardening apps out there, but many of them were not supported. They were not good. And they just kind of went away. Today, there's even more apps out there. So know that you might find an app and then it might not be supported. In addition, periodically go back in and turn on all your permissions, especially notifications, because if there is an update, you'll get an update to that app. And one of the apps I'm going to share with you, the Purdue Hort apps, they had some glitches and they really needed some fixes. So they did the updates and then that installed and automatically downloaded. Now, that said, if I went to the Purdue app and opened it up, it would ask me to turn on all my permissions and it would tell me there are updates available. Do you want these? Okay, so let's look at some of the gardening apps here. Hort apps, good. Click on that folder. Probably one of the top group of apps that I find people use the most are the Purdue Perennial app, the Purdue Tree Doctor, the Purdue Annual Doctor, and there's one on vegetables. So let's go into the Purdue Perennial Doctor. Being in extension and being Master Gardener Volunteers, as you know, and you've probably had it hammered home many, many, many times, we focus on research-based information. So that's one of the other things you have to kind of be conscientious about when you're using these apps, particularly if you're using it in the capacity as a Master Gardener Volunteer. Let's say you are doing the fair display or a farmer market display, and you're answering questions on gardening. These things are very useful and very helpful. Now, the Purdue apps typically cost around $1.99. They are worth every penny. And I'm not sure if they've gone up, but the last time I checked, they were still around $1.99. To develop one of these apps costs approximately $20,000. So this is why they ask you to buy these. It's because of supporting that app, supporting that update, supporting the upgrade. With Michael Durr's app, it was expensive. You bought it once, but there were no upgrades. There was no support. In Alan Armitage's app, he keeps upgrading his. It does cost, but there are upgrades available. So he's still going and he's still utilizing that particular app. So back to the Purdue Perennial Doctor. A lot of options here that you could use. So you can search by flower name. And we're going to start, let's just say something that's real easy. Everybody should be familiar with bee balm. So if you click on bee balm, you'll find flowers, the different type of flowers on bee balm. Go through, oops, I'm sorry, flower pests rather. Now what you'll see here, these are specific issues on bee balm, but it's cross-referenced. So basically what Purdue has done is created a database, and they've tagged all these different diseases with, you know, what they're affected by. So if you look at this one at the very bottom, also found on bee balm. So this is Western flower thrips. Affected part leaves, of course, Monarda, powdery mildew is common. You will see flower thrips on bee balm. You will see tomato spotted wilt. So these are just all the typical problems that could be found on bee balm. So if you see what I'm referring to in terms of a database, they entered powdery mildew as a disease, and then they would put a tag, all the different plants that powdery mildew would affect. So if I go into powdery or bee balm, for instance, powdery mildew is going to show up as one of those problems. All problems on bee balm, if you look at this list, you see all the different types of problems on here. The first rule in identifying and diagnosing plant problems is identifying the plant itself. So once you identify the plant, it's a little easier, but this gets to be a little bit of a challenge. As you go down through here, somebody brings a sample of bee balm in, and then you look at this, all the different potential items that could be a problem. But the one thing about this particular app is it does divide this into affected parts. So start out with the affected part as opposed to going into all problems. Now, the other great thing that you could use with this is it's a great learning tool. It's a great learning tool. So if you just, you know, you have plenty of time on your hand, go through particular pieces of this ambush bug. There's your ambush bug. There's the damage that it causes. There's the stages of the ambush bug and all the different plant or body parts. And there's control as well. And in this case, ambush bug is beneficial. So this is a great opportunity for some learning to occur. I don't know about you, but I typically have my cell phone later in the evening, sitting down, just scrolling through social media, but I also try to go to some sites and do some reading, do some learning, you know, to try to figure out, you know, learn things. What's going on? What is foliar blight? What does foliar blight look like? What are the key features? What's the damage caused by foliar blight? What are the stages, and what's the control? So again, this Purdue Plant Doctor, Flower Doctor is a great app. I can also search by diseases, which unless you kind of know diseases and are familiar with them, it's going to be a little harder, which is why you should always probably start with the particular flower. If I start with diseases and let's say, let's go foliar blight. Foliar blight shows what it does, shows the damage, and it goes through that process again. So unless you know specifically what that disease is, you know, you may not be as successful going this route. Then you can go insects. Insects, people tend to know a little bit better. Ants, aphids, Asiatic garden beetle, those are all the insects affected, or that you'll find on perennials and flowers. And then other, animal feeding, drought, edema, leaf scorch, nutrient deficiency, and all those different things that we deal with as well. Again, so this is something you're going to get. If you're enjoying this app, rate it. This is a perfect opportunity for me to encourage you to rate it. So remember back in the beginning, I suggested go in and rate an app, or I suggested that you look at the ratings. Well, you can be very beneficial to other people by rating that app. And I click on rate now. I'm going to give it a 5 because I find this app is absolutely outstanding, and they do a great job of keeping it updated. And then again, it came from the university. So as long as the university is around, this is something they're going to continue to support if people are using it. So review ratings, but be the other end of that side of the ratings and go in and actually rate them for people. And then doctor support here. Contact a clinic, you know, acknowledgments, the legal stuff that we all have to have since we are in extension. And then, of course, the user guide for this particular app. I can't say enough for the Purdue apps. I'll close out of this one. Again, the Purdue Tree Doctor, very similar to this. You get, I mean, look at this, conifers, shade trees. Again, first thing in plant diagnostics is identify the plants. And there are plant identification apps out there that I'll show here in a second. But I just think these Purdue apps are probably top of the line. You all are probably familiar with this one. Virginia Tech tree identification. Now you see what's happening on my screen. It actually needs access to the internet because this is such a big file that I'm not going to download it and keep it on my cell phone. So it will download the images for me at the time of use. It will give me all the information that I want. But I suspect, and if you're not, I suspect all of you are familiar with Virginia Tech tree identification. It's probably one of the top rated ones I would say that I use all the time, and not just the app, but also the website as well. And I'm going to stop this because I'm going to go on the assumption that you know this app or should know this app. And then Purdue Annual Doctor, again, another one of the great ones. One I like, and this is particularly useful for identifying plant problems and so forth, and that's plant families. As Master Gardener volunteers, what I find in Ohio, we really don't have a good skill set on understanding plant families. And again, going back to identifying plant problems, as you look down through this list, you might be able to figure out some of the most common problems with these particular families, because many of our diseases, many insects, and a perfect example is emerald ash borer. Emerald ash borer affects plants in the Oleaceae family. So if you go down through here, you learn about the Oleaceae family, you learn about all the different plants. This is not one that I think you're going to use on a regular basis for identification of things, but it is one that I think is an excellent learning tool, particularly if you don't have books on plant taxonomy or plant families. So if you look at this, the taxonomy, the family is notorious for incongruence between phylogenies based on blast, etc. This is going to give you some really good information on families. So this is a learning document or a learning app that I would recommend. Okay. The other ones you see there, Our Rose Garden is one of those. It's information, talks about roses, tells you about roses, gives you that information about roses. There's also one on ornamental grasses. So there are several good informative apps. So here's an example. Grasses has been updated. Choose what to allow this app to access. So again, when you turn off all those permissions, don't be concerned that the app will no longer be useful. So now all I have to do is grant permission. Oh, so I've got an older version, storage, grant permission, continue. And there's information on this particular app. Again, I go back then afterwards and I'm going to make sure I turn off all those permissions because they're just not necessary when the app's not running. Videos, gallery, plant declares. So this one and also the one on roses, and there's others out there. These are really good for use of, I couldn't get that to go back. For good for use of learning and some identification, although it's more for how-tos in terms of the app itself. All right, another one that I like, and I really, really like this one. This is not specific to gardening, but this has been a huge asset to me in terms of using it to measure. Okay, let me get through this. I apologize, I should have had this all set up. Using it to measure areas and distance. You know, we're always trying to figure out, no, I don't want to follow you. You're always trying to figure out, let's say, how big is a flower bed and how much mulch do I need? How big is a vegetable garden? And I have found this extremely useful for our display gardens that we have through Extension. And this is really easy to do. If I want to go in, let's do this. So this is our actual demonstration garden, Snyder Park Gardens and Arboretum. There's a clubhouse that's been identified. This obviously needs your location services turned on. This needs access to several things, and it's all on here because I use this regularly. But if I want to go in, we have a new children's garden that was installed, and you see that right here in the middle of the screen. I want to determine the size of that children's garden. I can do this via GPS measuring or manual measuring. I'm going to click manual. Okay. I'm going to put a little button here, a little button here, a little button here, and a little button here. That now tells me how big that particular children's garden is. We're going to save this. We're going to do children's garden. I'm not going to put it in a group because I spelled it wrong too. I'm not going to put it in a group, but now I know how big. Yeah, I don't want to do that. It's a free one, so you're going to get that kind of stuff. I want to know how big this is. Look at the top there, children's garden. The perimeter is 216 meters. The area is 22.79 acre. So this tells me exactly how big that particular garden is. I go back here to this particular garden and I click on it. This is 102 meters in perimeter. The area is 6.46 acres. So I have found this one to be extremely useful. This is one called our Early Ohio Settlers Garden. If I want to measure the distance, I can do the distance from maybe one tree to another tree. If I want to do the area, if I want to do GPS, I can actually go out and walk that area and mark it as I'm walking. So if I would click on GPS, I would start at the corner of that garden. And this is particularly useful for really weird shapes. You have kidney shapes, you have round shapes, you have triangles and that have indentations. I can stand at the corner of that, walk all the way around. The GPS will actually measure it. And when I finish, I know exact area. And then I can take that area and try to figure out the amount of mulch that I need for that area. So we're going to zoom in on this one. And this is real time because this is using Google Maps. And we could actually measure this particular area. There, 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 and there. And know exactly how big this garden is. So if we go in here and hit save, I'm going to put EOS for Early Ohio's. Now, you see where I have description and then a group. This is really useful. And I'm doing this right. I'm not doing this right now just for shortage of time, but this is really useful for us in this particular garden because now I can create a folder, and this group would be Snyder Park Gardens and Arboretum. And if we had several different gardens, for instance, or even in my own landscape, I could have perennial gardens. Here's all my perennial gardens in this group, or here's my vegetable garden in this group. So there's different ways that you could use this to save this information. So I go back in here, free. I can click on this and I now know that the perimeter of this is 51 meters. The area is 1.5 acres. I have 1.5 acres. So again, it's just, I think it's probably one of the most useful tools for measuring all of these particular areas, especially, you know, since we're doing a lot of deciding how much mulch, etc. So let me close out of that one. Fields area measure free. If somebody wants to type that in the chat box, then that way people would know. Field area measure free. And there's others out there. There's other measuring apps that can help you as well. And again, there's calculation apps. If you want to calculate, you know, if I want my mulch in 1.5 acres, 2 inches thick, how much do I need? So if somebody type in fields area measure free, that would help everybody remember that particular one. And then the last one I'll share before we get into some of the questions is the Great Lakes Early Detection Network. Allow to take pictures and record video? Yes, simply because with this particular app, what I can do is if I think this is Ailanthus altissima, and I think that, you know, this needs to be identified. I'm not sure if it is, but it needs to be identified. Or I think this is Asian longhorn beetle. I want to take a picture and submit it, and I want them to be able to, you know, identify and confirm. And I'm going to click allow only while using the app. I'm going to click allow. And now we have access to Great Lakes Early Detection Network. If there was an updated version of this, like I said before, the actual message would be, hey, there's an updated version. Do you want to download this? And of course, I would say yes. State species lists of species by state. That is not ready yet. And that is what they're working on. This is an app out of Georgia. There are a lot of universities that are working on this, so it's being continually updated. But eventually there will be a state species list, which I think is going to be really helpful. Species categories, aquatics, birds, crustaceans, fish. Let's go to insects. Since I mentioned spotted lanternfly, let's go down to, and again, oops, spotted lanternfly hasn't been updated. Yes, it has. There it is. No, it hasn't. Oh, there it is. Lycorma. Spotted lanternfly. So this is how I would go in and report an observation. The site name, and if I have my location services on, it will actually give me the GPS coordinates for this particular pest sighting. I can put my images in there, take a picture of it, send that in and submit it. Time spent in minutes, how long I was there, positive, treated, not found, host species, select a host, where did I find it? Its main species that I mentioned is tree of heaven. So I'd scroll down through here and that's not on here. So I would actually then put that in, unknown. Habitat, select habitat, type of damage to plants, host plant severity, stand, polygon, damage severity area. Is it like a lot I'm seeing or just a little bit? And then any additional notes. And then I would save that and I could report that observation. And again, our master gardeners are going to be getting trained on using this particular app because we are wanting them out and about and kind of looking for Ailanthus altissima or tree of heaven. So let's go back to species categories. Let's go to trees, Ailanthus altissima. This is what we're going to be asking them to use. We want them to go into Ailanthus altissima. We want them to look at tree of heaven, attach where they're finding it. Location is going to be critical. So location for Ohio, and typically what we're learning is that we see these a lot along railroads or railroad beds, the tree of heaven, and then we're also seeing the railroads, trains bringing in the spotted lanternfly, so it's kind of an interesting connection. The acres, the density of it, this information is going to be really important as Ohio moves forward in trying to work through this particular pest. So you have your species categories, you have all species, and then you have additional information, news feed, feedback, negative surveys. If you had negative survey report, upload queue, so upload your reports. People are going to start learning more and more about this, I believe, in the next few weeks here in Ohio. And I think this is something you may be interested in as well. I don't know what your spotted lanternfly infestation is at this time or if you have it, but it is something to really think about. I lied. I'm going to do one more wildflower identification. I could check for an update, but I'm not. Identify a new flower. This gets to be real, actually I'm going to do two more. This gets to be real challenging. As you know, when you're doing plant identification or pest identification or diagnostics, it's easy to go down the wrong path. This one actually uses more of a dichotomous key. So you have the opportunity, you know, it's so easy if you have the flower, but if you don't have the flower, it's a huge challenge. So this is good, but I caution you in terms of using some of these because it's really easy to go down the wrong path. Now, let me go back here to one identification that I want to share. PlantSnap is one that I've actually purchased. Remember the old leaf snap that used to be out there? That's no longer supported. PlantSnap is supported. However, is it 100% accurate? Not really. It's fair to Midland, I would say. You can see my camera's on. It's allowing the camera. I'm going to set it down here a second. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to try something live and see how this works. The old leaf snap was really a challenge because it was not very accurate. But PlantSnap, I have found the paid version is much more accurate. So we're just going to go ahead and do one real quick and see what happens. You want a picture of the leaf. You want an accurate picture of the leaf. You want a good picture of the leaf. And as in any electronic diagnostics, the better the picture, the better the picture, the better the diagnosis. So we're going to take a picture of this. We're going to make sure we get the entire picture. We're going to click on done. And then we're going to wait and see what comes back. And you get, kind of like the old leaf snap did, you get a kind kind of a listing of things. American Evergreen, we know it's not that. We know it's not arrowhead vine. We know it's not any of these, anthurium, philodendron. So here again, it didn't do a very good job on that. I would have to say, if I use this particular app, I would say 50 to 65, and that's being pretty generous. 50 to 65% of the time, I get fairly accurate identification. It does much, much better with flowers, of course. It'll do much better with flowers. But 50% of the time, I get pretty good, accurate information. So I pay $1.99 a month, and I probably do that more just so that I can teach master gardeners in terms of apps. The free version is not bad as well. And there's another one that people talk about that I haven't downloaded yet. And you might, if you know it, type it in the chat box. But it's another plant version that works well. And I have used that before, and it seems to be very successful. One that I found, somebody told me on a wildflower walk, and this is a millennial who uses it all the time, about Google Lens. And this was kind of exciting when I first found it, and it did a pretty good job. But Google Lens is used for a lot of things. So we're going to try Google Lens. We're going to put it up here to this leaf. It's getting the points right now. If I could hold my hand still, it'd be better. We're going to do a search, and look there. Syngonium podophyllum. That's exactly what it is. And then I can click on that. I have been more successful with using Google Lens. And I think this one has better potential. Again, both of these, you have to have data access. But in terms of being successful, I will go to Google Lens first before I go to PlantSnap. So try Google Lens. Google Lens is not just for plants. It does a lot of identification. It's pretty interesting to use, and I don't know enough about it to know how it works. But it does a pretty good job of identification, as you can see right here. So in terms of identification apps, I would definitely go with Google Lens. Now, one final thing on plant diagnostics. Plant diagnostics is very difficult and challenging at best with an app. I don't recommend that our Master Gardener volunteers, I've not found any of them that are really good, and I don't recommend that they use any of the diagnostic apps that are out there, because as you know, if you do diagnostics, you know that if you start going down, again, like a dichotomous key, if you start going down that wrong path, you're going to be totally off base. With plant diagnostics, the apps can be useful in assisting. So for instance, I don't know what this plant is. I use Google Lens. I find out it's Syngonium. Now I could go to an app that is maybe based on houseplant problems, and I could learn, go from there and dig down a little deeper. But when you get into a dichotomous key, is the leaf affected? Is the stem affected? I've not seen any really good solid apps out there that would take you down that right path and help you with an accurate diagnosis. Google Lens also IDs insects, Nancy, and Joey says iNaturalist. Yes, iNaturalist is very good as well. In fact, a lot of our Master Gardeners I know across Ohio have used iNaturalist, so that's another really good one. So in terms of apps, I'm going to go ahead. It's 10:48. I'll stop there. I could show you some of those apps that I don't think are very good, but I don't think that's really useful. That was just kind of an overview of some of the most common apps that I find people have used. What I was thinking, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do this, because in the past I've told people, send me your favorite apps and I'll put together a little fact sheet and send it out. But I have not ever completed that for 4 years, simply because there aren't a whole lot of apps that are consistent across iPad and Google, or the iTunes and the Androids. So consistency is very different. Some you'll find on one platform, some you'll find on both. The quality of some of them is very questionable. So I've not really put together that fact sheet that I told everybody I would do, because there's just too many, too many variables. So I was kind of wondering yesterday, would a closed group on Facebook, a Facebook group for Google or for apps, would that be useful? And say yes or no. And if I see a lot of yeses, I may consider developing a Facebook group on apps. And this would just be to go out and say, hey, I like this app. Here's what it does. Or I found this app to be really, terrible. Don't use it. Or I bought this app. And okay, so I'm seeing yeses. So I'm going to have to figure that out. I'm going to have to figure out how to get that out there and get people to join in. But I can do that with my colleagues across the state. Rebecca says garden answers free, still only about 60%. Yeah, from an extension perspective, I don't recommend that our master gardeners, to use it for your own use in your home or backyard, that's fine. But as for master gardener volunteers working like on a helpline or working at a fair or something like that, I would probably avoid that. Oh, good idea. Invite this email list. So that would be something to start with. Yeah, that would be a good start right there. Okay, so I can't say while I'm off or working at home because we still aren't off, are we, Kathleen? We're still doing a lot of work. I will let Kathleen know when the Facebook group starts, but give me a chance. It's going to be another week or so before I can sit down and actually dig into that. But I'm seeing a lot of positives about that. So this talk kind of prompted me to think, yeah, maybe that might be something useful and something we could use these next few days or weeks or however long we're going to be in this situation. So Kathleen, I'll turn it back over to you and open it up for questions and see what kind of questions are still out there.
Great. I did receive a few via email this morning. So the first question, which do you feel is the best app to use when folks ask questions at Ask a Master Gardener type events, whether that's a clinic or they're out in the community acting as master gardeners?
Okay, so that there's a lot of depends on that. And like a good horticulturist, we all, we know it all depends. What I just said in terms of identifying plant problems, I'd be really hesitant. Even the one that was just mentioned about, plant garden answers, you could start there, but I think as long as master gardeners were cognizant that, okay, I'm going to start here, but if I don't get what I am comfortable with and absolutely 100% sure, of course, in diagnostics, we're never 100% sure unless we test it at a clinic or something. But, unless you're really sure that you're on the right path, I would suggest that you use these apps as a resource for either identifying the plant itself. I think you could use any of the Purdue apps with great success if you knew the plant and you looked at like the leaves or the flowers or, the piece that's affected. I think the Purdue apps probably would be, of all of them that I've used, the most likely to help people with getting those right answers.
Great, thanks. Another one I got in this morning was, which do you feel are the most user-friendly apps that folks could use?
I'm going to have to go back to the Purdue. I think they're definitely user-friendly. If you look at the front, the entrance to it, it takes a little bit of navigation to understand, but what I find in apps, if the app doesn't take you easily back to the previous screen, it takes you somewhere else and you kind of get lost, you got to start over. There are some of those, but I don't work for Purdue, I work for Ohio State, so I'm not, trying to sell the apps, but they have just done an incredible job of really thinking these platforms out, and they didn't happen quickly. I know they took over 2 years to develop all of them. So there was some good thought put into them. And again, the reason I like them the most is because they are university-based. They get the process that we go through in diagnosing plant problems, and not everybody does in terms of just the general public.
If there are any other questions right now that have come up, I think we've answered all that have come up during the session in the chat box, but if anybody wants to type any questions, we still do have a few minutes.
There was a question about Seek, and I'm not sure what is Seek only for iPhones. What is Seek? Amy Weber, I'm not sure what you're asking. Does Google Lens work on iPhone? Absolutely. Well, I can't say that. I can't say that because mine's an Android. I've not actually, I haven't. Has anybody tried Google Lens on iPhone? Yes, thank you, Rebecca. I don't know what Seek is. Ah, okay. Yeah, I'm not, can anybody answer that question about Seek? Seek was developed by iNaturalist and can connect to iNaturalist if you're registered with it. Is iNaturalist free? I believe it is. Somebody said earlier, yes. Okay. 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 Any other questions? I hope this was helpful. I mean, there's just so much to it. And again, just to emphasize, it changes rapidly from the time I started doing this 4 years ago to today. The updates, the changes, the saturation of the market, it's really interesting to see how fast things change. Yes, Google Lens does ID insects.
All right, we just got a question. When will this webinar be available to share with our groups? I can take on that one. I have recorded this, and so as soon as it's downloaded to my computer, we'll get that into our webinar archive. So I think you should be able to find it into that link I just posted probably in the next couple days.
You're welcome,
Okay.
everybody. Thank you for having me, Kathleen. This was kind of fun, especially on a dreary day in Ohio to see so many master gardeners online. This was really kind of fun.
Thank you very much. We're so glad you were able to join us, Pam, and I hope the rest of your time working from home is successful.
As we all are finding out, right?
All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Right.
Again, we hope to see you the next third Thursday, April 16th, for interpreting soil test results. Stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see everyone then.
Thanks, Kathleen. Bye-bye. Tell Dave
Bye-bye.
hi.
I will.